Across many seasons of VFL AFL football, do you ever look at the turf and think, wow, the G's looking really good today with their grass and how green it is as well? But there have been times in our great history of this game that the surfaces can get a little bit crazy. And that is exactly what we're looking for in today's video, guys, as we look at the worst and craziest VFL AFL surfaces that a great game has ever been played on in the history. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. Kicking things off in 2002, where Dockland Stadium, or now known as Marvel Stadium, had some really bad issues with their surface around the ground. Like, across the 2002 season, Dockland Stadium was basically like a day at the beach. It was just really unplayable. Without any new grass for the venue, they had to resort to sand, and just have a look at these highlights across the 2002 season. I've got a couple games here that I did find that the sand had an appearance on. It was just incredibly bad for the players to play on. Players would even get injured by playing on this and getting sand in their eyes, struggling to keep their feet. And luckily in 2003, this issue was fixed and Dockland Stadium resorted back to the regular grass around the venue. And I mean, yeah, a mix of hard ground and sand definitely did not mix, and that definitely did show throughout the 2002 season. So luckily, it was saved in 2003. Going back to 1977 with the most uneven of mud patches at Windy Hill, when Essendon hosted North Melbourne, and here we can see a really mixed patched oval at Windy Hill with so much mud around the venue. And look, it just goes to show they really did not give two shits about how the venues looked back then. And yeah, I guess I can see why this occurred a lot in old day VFL. It was said though that lots of rain did sweep through the venue in the last couple days before the match, and it did result in Windy Hill becoming a big mud patched oval. And yeah, it still had those dark patches from the rain, and it just really was not good here. We can see some highlights from the Essendon North Melbourne game as well. It just overall would not have been good to play on. Although it is definitely not as bad as it was in round 13 of 1989 when Essendon took on Footscray. Again, Windy Hill getting another appearance on this video in one of the worst scoring games you will ever see in football history. It was a wet game all day. The ground, it was just fully mud this time. There was no grass, it was all mud. Players that were slipping over everywhere. I mean, not Drew Petrie like slipping over like this against West Coast. That probably could have made the list, but it wasn't really as bad. It was just kind of that moment that put that on here. But anyway, besides the point. But it really was a bad look for Windy Hill in 1989. It just didn't look like it was going anywhere, Windy Hill, and definitely going down as one of the worst AFL services we've ever seen in history. And just have a look at the jerseys as well, these players. Like, it just goes to show how much rain there was, and the scoreboard, it just shows it was so hard to score that day at Windy Hill. And folks, we're not stopping there with the mud. We're going back to 1960, which is absolutely crazy. In a game between Hawthorn and Melbourne at Glenferrie Oval, the ground literally turned to concrete. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but really, there was rain the day before the big game in 1960, and the ground had that much dried up mud, it was turning into concrete. The mud covering the soft areas of the grass as seen here, and it made a really horrible experience for footy to be played on the day. And believe it or not, folks, if you did not know, the reason for Glenferrie Oval's departure in the VFL was because of its surface and how bad it was. It was basically just unplayable, and the VFL, they really didn't look after it, nor did Hawthorn and any other club that played at Glenferrie Oval. So, bit of a fun fact there for you. And yeah, it just showed here how bad the surface actually was at Glenferrie Oval, especially in the 60s as well. But just have a look at this old footage, folks. Literally, the 50 is nothing but hard, dried up mud. And with the exception of the goal square being sloppy mud, I'm really glad football isn't played at Glenferrie Oval anymore. However, nowadays, football is definitely played with these venues still flooded, there I say. Round 1 in 2018, we nearly saw a genuine flooded out Kazali Stadium when North Melbourne and Gold Coast played in Cairns. There were players slipping over everywhere. Some bloke got absolutely sent into the fence. They weren't even fighting while the water was still flying everywhere. Even the camera was not focusing because of all the rain. But back to the surface, Kazali Stadium would have been a pool if that rain continued on throughout the night. And I think early on in the game was just when the ground was fully flooded. And I guess later on, it was starting to turn into mud, but no good signs were really showing for Kazali Stadium that night. The game I could nearly say was unplayable. The North Queensland weather just really took over Cairns that night and nearly made this game cancel. Probably not, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but still, it was really bad. A very low scoring finish to the game as well, and overall, the crowd was just looking atrocious in the last quarter from all of that. Earlier this year in round 19, down at GMHBA Stadium, we've seen one of the worst services we've ever seen in the 21st century. I better say 20th century, but the 21st century. It was Geelong and the Western Bulldogs that went head-to-head Saturday night, and before the game, there was a massive Geelong storm that swept through, and there were no covers on the venue, on the field I should say, and the game was just played in the most shocking of conditions, and the ground turned to mud, and players were struggling to find their feet everywhere. Here's some highlights of the game if you didn't see it earlier. All night we saw players falling, slipping, fumbling all night long, and just hopefully we never see something like this in the AFL again. And GMHBA that's probably got to be one of the worst services at Kardinia Park you will ever see in your life. Although in 1993 in the Foster's Cup, this would have to go down as one of the worst services in VFL AFL history. Although in the 1993 Foster's Cup series, this would have to go down as one of the worst services ever played on in VFL AFL history. Believe it or not, we're going to Waverley Park with this one, where Carlton took on Footscray, and I think it was the semi-final of the Foster's Cup, but it was definitely a final to forget. Battling it out on a regular grass turf at Waverley Park, or so we thought. So it turns out Waverley Park was actually not ready to host any games that night, or even for the entire Foster's Cup series, and it resulted in grass patches flying everywhere around Waverley Park. There was sand getting kicked up from beneath everywhere. There were players who were struggling to stay up, and going for the ball as well was just a big struggle for all players that night. And Waverley Park was just becoming a massive mess in 1993, that Foster's Cup. And before the match as well, Hawthorn played an inter-club practice match, and they described it as one of the worst services they've ever seen in their life, and the worst service they've ever seen at Waverley Park. And in a crazy turn of events, Luke O'Sullivan, after tripping on a divot in the ground, even needed knee surgery and put him out for the entire 1993 season. And Andrew Phillips, also suffering a knee injury as seen here, needing to be carried off the field. And in a shocking and crazy turn of events, the groundskeeper at VFL Park actually went on to get sacked by the VFL. And after that, a new groundskeeper came in, and it went back to a different and probably a better state for VFL Park Surf, and remained a better turf than a lot of venues around Australia ever since. Anyway guys, that does wrap up today's video. If you did enjoy and would like to see more content like this in the future, do leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell as well, so you don't miss out on when I upload new videos like this. If there were any more services that you guys have found online or on YouTube and would like me to do a part 2 of this video, comment down below where it is and when it was as well, and I'll be sure to get around to doing a part 2 as well. And if you want to further support the Footy Sirens YouTube channel as well, do consider becoming a member for just $2.99 a month. Really helps me make more content, and you get early access to videos as well, along with members only videos and content. But anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See you.